Welcome back to a very horrid show this evening. Halloween 2020. If things haven't been bad enough, they're going to get worse. So sit back and check it out.
I love how you said horrid like our previous 114 episodes haven't been. I know, I just took all the wind out of your sails. Sorry.
It's Halloween 2020, and as creepy as Halloween could possibly be, this year has been shocking one step to the next. But, oh, what the heck? We're still kicking, so we're going to go ahead and have as good a time as we can now, right?
That's right. It's 6:30 Pacific. Do you know where your pumpkins are?
Or your red slippers.
Oh, red slippers, yes. This is the Halloween episode, which actually, as we record this, it's like the 20th. It's going to come out on like the 27th as the audio podcast. So it's still going to be before Halloween. So are we the ghosts of Halloween's yet to come, or we're kind of in between? We don't even, yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, happy Halloween, y'all. Trick or treat.
They wouldn't have known any of that if we wouldn't have been so darn honest.
I believe in transparency.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Mark for city council.
No, you don't want me in charge of anything. I can barely remember what I had for lunch.
Well, see, that's already a good trait. We need more of that.
No. You don't want me in charge of anything.
So I was thinking, Halloween, it's not the same as it used to be. And I don't know whether that's because of us traveling down the lifespan timeline or because of some other factors that we're not aware of. What do you think?
I think it's the first one. I think it's because we have outgrown Halloween. A lot of people don't, and I get that. A lot of folks love and live for Halloween, but the excitement that was Halloween when I was a kid is just not there anymore. It's another day to me,
That's right. But now send me a link to an awesome Roman history or medieval history frickin' series and a cup of hot Joe, and I'll be kicking back, being thrilled like nobody's business. It's funny how that works.
Yeah, we have lived in this house for 8 years, and we've had 3 trick-or-treaters, and we were related to all of them. So, we just don't get a whole heck of a lot of kids because, like every other neighborhood, they go to the rich side of town, and they trick-or-treat up there where they think they're going to get a, full-size 3 Musketeers or something.
Yeah.
So we still do. We buy a bag of candy that we like, and we put it in the bowl, set it by the door. Everything is all set and ready to go just in case there's a knock. And then the next morning we divvy it up and go on our merry way. So,
well, likewise here in this area, it used to be that it was flooded with kids, and I exaggerate not. There were little clans with the parents and then the youngins traveling down the sidewalk in different groupings, and you'd see one grouping and they'd have like little pumpkin flashlights and stuff, and you'd see them walking and talking while the kids were walking in front of them. You'd look across the road, there's another group and stuff, and depending on my age, I would be one in those groups. And as I got a little bit older, I was allowed to venture out on my own with my older friends, and that was a recipe for disaster because we went out on the prowl in the witching hours, traveling across, and the toilet paper flinging and the eggs and the whole thing. We did a little bit of all of that. Not nice, but we did it, but there was a lot of that. And then nowadays, for the past, I don't know how many, within the last decade, you can't throw a rock and hit a trick-or-treater. So it's like, it appears at least that that demographic, families with young kids are gone from
Well,
this area.
and that may very well be. Of course, you're right across the street from a university too, so the average age there is, we're talking student.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of young kids around. Most of them have moved on. The families with young kids have moved on. I'm sure there's some,
Yeah.
but we're in kind of sort of the same situation here. It's mainly older adults that live around here. There are a few kids in the neighborhood. There are more now than there have been the first 5 years we lived here. But even then, because we're a little bit further north than you, it gets dark a little earlier here. And you can see it come and go in stages because the young kids, we're talking like, 2, 3, 4 years old, they would come around as the sun was going down about 7 o'clock. And then they would thin out. Then pretty soon here you have all the 8 to 14-year-olds running around from anywhere from, say, 8 o'clock until like 9:30. And then you have the older kids who were, it's like, dude, don't you think you're a bit old for trick or treating? That kind of a thing until about 10, 11 o'clock. But I can remember being out with my friends and we would go through our neighborhood and then go, several blocks over to the next neighborhoods and then several blocks to the next, and just be out and about until 10, 11 o'clock at night. And then we always ended up down at the end of our cul-de-sac. So my parents knew where I was, but I could be out late. It was, it wasn't a school night. Everything was cool.
Yeah.
But it just seems like here lately, the parents know to take their kids over up on the swankier side of town, and that's where they do the majority of trick or treating. They just don't come around here anymore. And I'm in a suburban, neighborhood. I mean, I got houses. We got a lot of houses around here. It's just they don't go trick or treating around here at all. They all go to town.
Yeah, and I wonder, any of you out there, if in your neighborhoods you still have a strong trick or treating, active, throughout the year you have strong trick or treat. There's plenty of trick or treaters or not, but I find that here it's gone the way of the dodo bird. So that whole thing led me to think about, what. And I never asked you this, I don't think. What actual costumes that we may have had used as kids. But before we get into that, I do want to mention that in my era of the 80s, the costumes, I have a little list and I'll just run through it very quickly of the popular sort of, ones that people had.
Okay, now you're talking about store-bought costumes and not the ones that you made yourself, right?
Well, in this case, it's just a basic list of the ones that were out there. Uh-huh. So they were more than likely store-bought costumes. But we'll get into that. I'll just run through them just to mark them out.
Okay.
And then later, I guess, the conversation is roughly, what you would have worn, what I would have worn, what you would have worn, and a little bit of background on that, just to get the atmosphere going for the next part of our conversation later on down the line, if it works out that way, because we never know what's going to happen. But throughout the 80s, which was my time, we had Alf, which is a funny thing. I would have hated to wear that. I never did. Cabbage Patch Kids, like the little plastic masks and whatnot. You just put it on, and it had the rubber band, that pressed or vacuum formed plastic. Yep. There was a Freddy Krueger, of which I did buy that mask. It was there were a couple of styles. There was a Pac-Man, a Barbie, those cheapy masks, Care Bears, Jason the hockey mask, and of course Superman costumes. And those were a few of them. I know that there's way more, and that's why we'll get into it now. But what did you growing up, if you can remember, what were the costumes you wore?
Of the store-bought costumes, and we had the same thing. You had the one-piece pullover that had the little drawstring that tied behind the neck, and then you had that vacuum formed or heat formed mask with the little rubber band went around the back of your head. One year I wore Casper the Friendly Ghost. One year I was Bugs Bunny. Then I started getting into wanting to make my own costumes. I was a cowboy. I was a pirate. I was all kinds of stuff. I mean, it just depended. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about what I was going to do, but about the week before, I would go down to we had Kmart and uh, a couple of other department stores. There was no Walmart at the time. And we would pick out bits and pieces here and there. So it would be just weird stuff like I'm wearing a pair of my father's sweatpants with newspaper stuffed down in them. So it looked like I filled them out really huge. And I'm 10 years old, you know. And then a gorilla mask with a big cigar, you know.
That's funny.
One of those rubber gorilla masks, you know, and just a down jacket because it's cold, you know. And this was in the San Francisco Bay Area, and like Mark Twain said, the coldest winter I ever spent was the summer I spent in San Francisco. It never really warms up. The wind blowing off the bay was bitter, so you always wore a coat. So it didn't really matter what you dressed up from the waist to your neck because you were wearing a down jacket and couldn't see it anyway. So but it was just goofy stuff like that. But about the only characters anybody would recognize would be Casper the Friendly Ghost and Bugs Bunny.
Yeah. Wow. If you heard rap at the window like Edgar Allan Poe would write, it wasn't some creature trying to get into the house. It was Vigo tap dancing. I'm trying to usher him away, and he's like just doing a little ballerina dance, man.
He must think you have food.
I mean, boy. So how about made costumes that did you have a family member, grandma that would make you was there any of that?
You know, yes. And this was, I don't even remember it, but there's a picture floating around here somewhere I have of my Aunt Sue and I was one, maybe two, and they dressed. Now, my aunt is my father's sister, and she's only about 5 years older than me. She was a surprise. And they dressed us up as Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy.
Oh, that's funny.
And I don't remember it. My grandmother made the costumes and did the makeup and all this other good stuff. So somewhere floating around is basically my 6 or 7 year old aunt standing there with me looking up at her, and I'm dressed like Raggedy Andy and she's Raggedy Ann.
That's funny.
And that's about the only costumes I can remember anybody making for us. Everything else was store-bought. Now, you're also talking 55, 56, 57 years ago. So I really don't remember all that much. All I remember was being excited that Halloween was coming. I do remember Bugs Bunny because I pitched such a fit because I wanted to be Bugs Bunny. And Casper was kind of a, okay thing. My mom wanted me to wear that, so I did, you know. It was one of those, you're going to wear this. And I'm like, I don't want to be Catherine. You're going to wear this. And so I wore it begrudgingly. But the next year I wanted to be Bugs Bunny, and that was all there was to it.
So I was lucky because my grandmother on my mother's side, both grandmothers were seamstress or they sewed. Uh-huh. And my grandmother on my mom's side, she, since as far back as I can remember, and luckily I have photos to be able to recall, like look at it and say, oh yeah, and have a glimpse of the time, you know, just a little impression. But I was a doctor, like little, like I don't know how old I was a doctor. I was an Aladdin, you know, like a Arabic prince with the shiny it was like 1970s style Arabic, right? So with the 1970s, like today would be a different fabric, and back then it was like shiny. I was ready for the disco. Let's put it that way. It's weird how that works. I was Superman. I was Batman. I was a ninja. I was a pirate. And the ninja, and these costumes my grandmother would make, very detailed. The ninja, I wanted to be a ninja, but I wanted to be like a woodland ninja. So she found what you call the army pattern. I forget.
Camouflage.
Yeah, so I was a camouflage ninja, and all that. So I did all that, and then of course I had some store bought ones, as in some years, such as the Freddy Krueger mask, which there was a store called the Barefoot Mailman, which we've talked about before.
Yeah.
And Barefoot Mailman was one of those like a Spencer's, sort of store that has a little bit of like gags and sometimes and knives and different types of musical and just gag stuff. And it's just really cool. And it was in the mall, in International Mall, the same place that I would later work at when Barefoot Mailman shut down and they opened up a housewares place called Lecter's. So I worked in the same place where I used to love to go and look at all the cool, they had like a gold record with John Lennon sitting at the top, and then they had a lot of just everything you could imagine, Star Wars weird things. And the Barefoot Mailman was where people were mailmen that would walk the coast of Florida, taking the mail down to and fro, and it's like a very Florida thing. And that store was called that. But yeah, I had the Freddie Mercury mask.
Freddie Mercury?
Oh, I'm sorry, Freddy Krueger mask. I'm sure there's a Freddie Mercury mask. I had the Freddy Krueger mask, and it was like this, that really well done molded thing, and you just over your head, and it was cool, dude. I had the suit. My grandmother did make the suit though. So she was actually, without computers and printing out patterns, she would look through catalogs and say, so that's the striped, thing. And then the pants and she would go sit and she'd go ahead and do all these things. It's, I'll find some pictures and stuff, and I'll put one on my personal thing and one over there at the, in the Trampled, if I can find a cool one to add. But yeah, she was very good at it. Yeah.
My mother hated to sew, but my grandmother on my father's side was the one who was real creative and crafty and things like that. I also vaguely remember, but I have a question for you first. The Freddy Krueger mask you wore, did it have the hat molded in, or was it just the mask and then you wore your own hat with it?
You could buy. So I bought the mask itself. It didn't have the hat on it, but you could buy the hat separately. Unfortunately, the hat wasn't like an awesome fedora. The mask was badass. Like if you put the molding underneath the shirt, and it looked like freaking creepy. I mean, you could tell it's obviously a mask, but it would stick to your face, so you'd look like. And I used to scare the heck out of my little cousin back then. And I'd come to where he'd be staying with my grandparents and I'd go with the mask hidden, and then I'd go into the kitchen. Oh yeah, this and that. And I'd put the mask on. I said, "Hey man," and I'd walk out with like the change, no mask to me, and I walk out. And he was like, "Oh," and I said, "What?" So I used to love doing that, which was cruel, and he remembers it to this day, by the way, as a trauma.
He does.
Yeah, he tells me, "Yeah, man, that was traumatic, man."
Well, I think the last year I wore a store-bought costume. I don't remember what I went as, but that was the year that It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown came out. So I just looked it up. That was in 1966. So I was 5, and I wanted to be Snoopy. I wanted to be Snoopy bad. Snoopy was a huge character. All the kids loved Snoopy. And there were no costumes to be had. You couldn't steal a Snoopy costume because every kid wanted to be Snoopy. I mean, the country went Snoopy crazy for a while. There were songs written about Snoopy, that were in the top 40 on the radio. It was weird, and I can't explain it, but it was one of those 60s crazes that went just nuts.
Like the Red Baron song.
Yes, Snoopy and the Red Baron. Yeah, there was a Christmas song. There was Snoopy versus the Red Baron. All that stuff. The country went Snoopy nuts, and I wanted to be Snoopy so bad I could taste it, and it was just not gonna happen because you couldn't have stolen a costume. They were gone as fast as they could make them, and as fast as they could put one on the shelf, it was gone. It didn't matter what size it was. So I don't even remember what I went dressed as, but I decided after that I wasn't going to wear any more store-bought costumes because those were for little kids. And I'm 6 this year. I'm not a little kid anymore. That's for little kids. So that's when the cowboy and the pirate and the clown and that kind of stuff started happening. And as I got older, the less creative I got, and I got real lazy. So, but I still had fun.
Can you remember the last? I can't remember the last costume you wore.
I think I was about 13.
Actually, I can remember the last costume. Unfortunately, I'll tell it now. But go ahead.
Yeah, I think I was about 13 was the last time I went out and did that, and I started deciding, you know what, this is for kids. Mom and Dad are buying a bunch of candy. I don't need to go traipsing all over town and begging for candy. I can just stay home and eat what they don't give away. And eat all night long, and I'll hand out candy.
Right.
So started doing that, and dressing up and scaring little kids and stuff like that, while handing out candy and not trick or treating yourself.
I mean that's the same thing with me. Yeah, I ended up like staying home. Let's say there would be a movie, and we'd have the like a bucket full of whatever the heck, a bowl full of, and as kids would come, we'd scare the crap out of them, and it's cathartic now, isn't it?
But I carried over because I can remember when we were stationed in Savannah, Georgia. My oldest stepson, I'm kind of surprised he's not in the live chat here on YouTube. He's been with us the last couple of weeks. I guess he missed this week. When we were stationed in Savannah, Georgia, he had just turned 18 and graduated high school and came out to live with us for a while in Georgia to kind of experience more than Southern California. The first Halloween he was there, he dressed up. We had a chaise lounge that we put out in the front yard. And he, went out to a field, kind of picked a little bit of weeds and straw and stuff. He put on a red plaid shirt and a big floppy hat and work gloves and work boots. And he stuck a bunch of grass and stuff down his sleeve and up his pant legs and everything, and laid back on that chaise lounge with that mask on and a big floppy hat, and just kind of laid there. And especially girls, they would do the trick or treat thing at the door, and as they left the door, he would sit up and go, "Arr!" or something like that, and scare the hell out of those people.
Have you ever, now that you're saying that, have you ever related subject loosely? Actually quite closely. Have you ever been like so focused on something? Maybe you're fixing something or just whatever menial thing you're doing, and you happen to turn for a moment, and just someone you totally know is just standing right there, and you get totally freaking frightened. You're like, ah! You scream because they're like sitting right there, or you think you're alone, you're working, and you just turn around. There's somebody right. Has that ever happened to you? Like that moment of fright?
I have no idea what you're talking about. Do I, Linda? Talking to my wife out there in the chat. She does that to me like on a weekly basis. I'll be focused on something and turn around. There she is right there. It's like I have a stealth wife. She makes no noise at all. And just I turn my head and Jesus, say something, anything, make a noise. We do each other.
No, but dude, it's just because here's the thing. Putting away all bad scaring the other person intentions, just the fact of you're in your areas, be it a room, the garage,
Yeah.
and you're focused on a thing, and just the person happens to just do by, because they're just there, and you're so focused, and when you turn, the issue of just another person instantly, it's survival.
Yeah.
You think you're gonna be eaten or killed,
It's almost fight or flight. You can see the hands clench because I do it to her too. I'll come out of this room and go walking down the hallway, and I'm humming to myself, or I'm beep 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 beep, and I'm not being quiet. I'm just walking from one room to another, and she's standing looking at the TV with the remote in her hand, going to change the channel, and I'll walk up, put my arm around her, and she'll jump up almost to the ceiling. She's focused on reading the TV guide channel, and I come bumbling up, and it's not an intentional thing, because I don't know if I could sneak up on her, but it's not intentionally trying to sneak up on it, but we do it to each other. And about once a week, minimum once a week.
I call a good, continuing with this line, and I'm kind of partial to horror movies myself, but I call it a good horror movie when the director, the way they organize the different gags, or the different scare moments, where it's coming and they hit you with it, right? It's coming and they hit you with it, and you're like, but then they do one quickly in such a creative way to say, we led you in the trap. You took the cheese from the mousetrap. It snapped, but you were smart about it. But we got a harpoon coming at you. That double. And I like when they do that, because it's almost a challenge of watching horror movie, and you're not going to scare me. You're not going to scare me. Like, that's a part of it. You're not going to scare me. No, you're not. I'm not scared of that. I'm not scared of that. And then that whole, it's like going through trials of fire, let's say, and you make it out, and you're like, I dug that movie. You didn't scare me at all. I got it. But some movies, it'll have you looking over like, if you do it in the dark, I don't care who you are. Well, I don't know. Maybe there's some stone cold people out there, but if you watch a movie with headphones and it's a scary one, you're gonna turn your head every now and then. You gotta make sure that the creature hasn't jumped out of the
It
screen.
doesn't even have to be a scary one. Like, I'm sitting back here. I'm way at the far end of the house. Living room is down at the other end of the hallway. Our bedroom is beyond that. The kitchen and dining room are down in that area too. So I'm way down here by myself. And Linda's in there asleep and everything. And if I hear something, even though I've got headphones on, I can still hear stuff around. If I'm watching a video or a movie or something like that, and something's happening in the headphones, I'll take them off and kind of look around and listen. Was that on the movie, or was that in here? Stuff like that.
Have you had the extreme panning of a movie?
Yes.
And you're like, huh? And you turn your head to the
Yeah, exactly. Because the neighbors over here are closer than the neighbors over on this side. So I'm sitting here and I hear something in this headphone, I will turn my head. Now there's a wall right here. I don't know what I expect to see, but I heard it real clearly over here, and it's just, you can't help it. So you're a big fan of the double jump scare then, huh?
Yeah. Within the context of horror, I like that whole, because it's unexpected. Like, they really got me, man. Mm-hmm. And then I classify it as, well done, guys. But if it's a straight up crappy one, like crappy scare tactic, I'm like, But if they do it psychologically on you, and you can say, oh well, there was thought put into this for for the audience, then yeah, I appreciate that.
The double jump scare. Okay, cool. Yeah, see, it's a little bit different because we have different classifications of horror movies. So, what I consider horror movies are the ones that I grew up with. So we're talking about back from the 30s up into the 60s. I think probably that era ended with Rosemary's Baby. Psycho may have, that was the first swing of the hammer, but Rosemary's Baby was probably the nail in the coffin on the type of psychological thriller that I'm talking about. Um, but from there, it went on to, Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween and, all of the other, what I call slasher movies, which was a completely different thing to me. It was still the horror genre,
Yeah.
but it was not the unknown. It was, you just can't get away from it.
Yeah.
So, it's just, that's a generational thing. So,
There were different categories, and I like the boy, I forget the guy's name now. The from Psycho, the director. I
Alfred
can't.
Hitchcock.
I like the how Alfred Hitchcock movies because they were cerebral on a certain level, and even for its time, um, the surrounding movies that would come out,
Mhm.
his work was exceptional in its planning and visuals. There was a lot of psychology involved in getting the audience through the movie, and it was very good. In the 80s, there was a lot of blood and gore,
Mhm.
but nowhere's near what would eventually come into existence in the 90s and the 2000s. But it was pretty gory, but the explicit, like, the blood and guts pouring out, you saw that, but it's become so much more realistic
Right.
as time has gone by. But in there, by adding more of that and not focusing in some cases the psychology of it, it doesn't matter how gory it is if you don't have the setup.
Mhm.
It's not as good. It's good to have the story right,
Right.
complex enough to involve people, and just pure blood and gore is not necessarily,
And
you know
there was plenty of that in the 70s. What happened was a lot of the motion picture codes, the laws that governed motion pictures were relaxed. Some of them were repealed. And so it was like not quite the gloves are off, but they were loosened up. And so different different studios started pushing the boundaries to see where that line was. And so you had, I'm trying to remember some of the old Hammer films that came out of the UK with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. um, I can't remember. There was a lot of satanic worship cult movies, things of that nature. I can't remember any titles right off the top of my head, but they were so low budget as compared to other motion pictures at the time. They kind of played in second rate and third rate theaters that didn't get the big blockbusters. They had their followings, and there were people that absolutely loved that, but they were more like you were talking about, the blood and gore and guts for the shock value. There
yes.
wasn't a whole heck of certainly wasn't much character development. There wasn't a whole lot of a plot. It was more or less just exploitation of the easing of the laws. So, it
Yeah.
there was some of that, but I don't know, the genre. I used to get a kick out of it, the old science fiction, the old horror, and I'm talking about, like I said, back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. But I don't know, as I grew up, I guess, I don't know, I kind of got away from that genre and started focusing more on comedy and drama. So,
Well, now that we're talking about that, um, movies in that category and all that, I think that we could, try for the topic at hand because it leads into it perfectly. Um, if that's okay.
yeah, that's fine with me, but I got to comment over here for just 1 second. We have Jim Dockrell and Hobbies Woodshop out here in the chat, and they're basically doing a line by line script of Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein, which, I don't care who you are or what genre of movie you like. That was one of the absolute best movies to ever be made was Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein.
So
There, I said it, and I'm glad.
well, so there is also the sort of, I guess, comedy aspect, and then there's some things that are, I don't know how you would place it, that it's not necessarily comedy full throttle, but it's lighthearted horror, like in the 80s, Teen Wolf,
Oh yeah,
as an example. It has a horror element to it because it's the inclusion of the werewolf, which happens to be the topic I'm gonna lay on the table here. But and I'm wondering, did you pick werewolf for yours?
you'll just have to find out.
Okay, all right. So because what we did was that we decided to go off on our merry way and ponder, you know, I guess you could say, a creature, monster that we might be curious about, interested, or have some sort of childhood memory about, or anything like that, or just simply interested, and that we sort of explore it a little bit and then share it here within the context of Halloween 2020. And a lot of these things are so ingrained in the human experience, that we all have a starting point, reference to many of these things. But yeah, so Teen Wolf was I wouldn't call it a comedy. Would you call it a comedy?
Yes, it was a comedy in that it had a I'm going to call it a spooky undertone to it. So two movies that came out roughly the same era, but were completely different, were Teen Wolf and An American Werewolf in London.
Mm-hmm.
Now, although there were a few funny gags, a few funny lines in An American Werewolf in London, there is no way you could call that a comedy.
No, it was a horror. But
Teen Wolf, on the other hand, was very much a comedy. It was for entertainment. Yes, it had the werewolf, aspect to it, but it while it did focus on the werewolf thing, it didn't get dark like An American Werewolf in London did.
Right. But as far as comedy is, and by the way, I went to see American Werewolf in London with my dad. I sat in the theater as a kid. What year did that come out? 80 something, right?
Yeah, it was in the 80s or late 70s or early 80s. Yeah.
I remember sitting and watching, and that movie freaked the crap out of me. And the transformation was pretty for a little kid watching that back then. It was pretty. I mean, my dad had no problem. I mean, I don't know what movies he didn't take me to see, but the ones he allowed me to see wouldn't be what kids nowadays would be allowed to see, because I saw some heavy duty, crazy freaking movies.
That was 1981, so you were 6 when that movie came out.
I saw it sitting,
And you talk about that transformation scene. I remember that being, you had the morning shows, Good Morning America and the Today Show on NBC. They played parts of that clip, the transformation scene, over and over again because people couldn't believe the special effects. It was that good. I mean, it's kind of corny and campy now, and you can tell that it's mainly latex. But back then, that was state of the art. That was cutting edge, and people were just blown away by that.
I don't
really something.
One of the weird things, and there was many movies like that. I mean, my dad would take me to the old movie theater because this one wasn't even created yet. The one here in Sweetwater, he'd take me to the old one downtown in Little Havana here in Miami, called the Jose Marti movie theater. It was a small little movie theater. And I saw that and many other ones. But a striking thing from that movie that I remember from a little kid was that the protagonist was sitting, and I remember I remember it like a snapshot.
Mm-hmm.
That I was sitting in the theater with my dad, and I was watching the movie, and in the movie there are creatures sitting in a movie theater
Yeah.
And that concept of that juxtaposed
Mhm.
reality to, movie, and the similar thing, it was really like, I think in many ways, well, I can't say now, but I think it helps, or it helped me sort of, at least in this aspect, like pond or prepare me to sort of like ponder things that weren't necessarily the standard thing you'd walk down the road to take a look at. It probably screwed me up pretty bad too. Who knows?
My first wife and I saw that at a drive-in. So I thought, it's kind of weird that something was taking place in the movie theater, but it didn't really seem that close to me because I wasn't sitting in a movie theater at the time. But,
Well, and you were older,
well, I was 20.
so you
So
were still impressionable somewhat.
I was still in that, oh, cool stage. And
Yeah.
it was an explosion in special effects about that time. We were just coming off of the release of The Empire Strikes Back, and we had the Indiana Jones movies, and now this is coming out. And then what was that movie with Nastasia Kinski, Cat People? And so the makeup and special effects when it come to people, characters that you're seeing on the screen, it's no longer that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing out of the 1930s where one actor bends down over a counter and then all of a sudden there's a skip edit and stands back up and he's the monster now. You
Right.
actually saw the transformation before you, and it wasn't a skip edit or crossfading or something like that.
Huge leap.
Oh, it was
Progress.
and it was just, I mean, audiences were just blown away by that because it was new and it was very well done for the time. So,
I mean, that
even something like Jaws, now we can look at it and you
took
can
the
say,
words right out of my
"Oh my
mouth.
God, that's a rubber shark," and you can tell. Back then, it was new. That effect was new, and you couldn't tell, or maybe you didn't want to tell. You were invested in the movie. You were sold on the effect. So,
So it's a funny thing because eventually they opened up a theater here, which we've talked about before, in Sweetwater, and younger. So we would drive. My dad would, come on, let's go. Get in the car, open up the big door, get in, smoking cigarettes while you're driving. You're like, oh, I hope we get there quick. And it was just a short drive. And then as I got older, my grandfather would take me walking, so I to the same theater. It's such a wonderful memory, because I also have the ability, obviously, now to, in retrospect, think, all these people, adults, took the time. I mean, why wouldn't they? But just the aspect of the, sharing time and the lessons, the little tidbits of information, and all these things. It's just fond memories and stuff. And going to the theater itself, such a
yep.
wonderful thing. But my dad, there was no real limit to it. Could be total destruction. It could be anything from Rambo to Rocky to whatever, to like one of those exploitation films where it's like all shoot 'em up in the seedy areas of New York, and like the protagonist would walk into like a bar and there'd be naked women dancing, and my dad say, cover your eyes, and I'd cover my eyes, and then I'd just go, open the little fingers between the thing, but like it's like there was no, like, today it would probably be considered completely unethical and not
Well,
acceptable.
we really basically have the same motion picture rating system we had back then. But I remember movies before there was a rating system, and they came out with that. I can still remember you went to the movies, they played a little bit before the movie started, and it was explaining what G rated meant. And back then it was G, M, R, and X. G was general admission, all audience. M was for mature audiences. it later became PG and PG-13. And R was no one under 18 unless accompanied by an adult. And then X was X. No one under 18 permitted at all.
Yeah.
Then they kind of changed that around a little bit. M became GP, then it became PG, then they added PG-13. So, but so you had, when you were talking at that time, they were under that rating system. But before that, it was, you had the morality codes and the laws that basically said this can't be shown in theaters. And a lot happened, a lot of lawsuits and everything changed those laws, court rulings and what have you. And a lot of them were just overturned, and a lot of them just kind of, went by the wayside. And that's when a lot of that stuff started coming along. But they could get away with certain things, but they couldn't get away with most things. And it was when those laws relaxed that the slasher movie started coming along.
Yeah, and they sure did come along.
Boy.
Well, talking about since we mentioned Teen Wolf and all the things we've talked about, since we had programmed at least a loosely associated idea of bringing to the table, to the podcast, sort of a little background on, be it a creature, something to that effect, something that's curious to ourselves, and to share it here and see what conversations open up about that. Well, I guess I'll go first, rudely, because I said I set it up in such a way where
I just said you were.
I was about to say you want to go first, but I just realized that I set it up so totally for me to go first. I'll just say that mine's was werewolves, taking a look at werewolves, and it was because growing up, not first. As far as my experience, it wasn't Teen Wolf, although that was a big one because you got to see it in a lighthearted way. But early on, I watched Abbott and Costello meets the Wolfman, or something to that effect. And that movie, I didn't see it in the theaters. I saw it at home with my grandpa, watching it on TV, which he used to love to do, just sit and watch the Abbott and Costellos and all that.
Yep.
And it's actually the first in a series of horror connected films that Abbott and Costello did. And this one I think came out in 1940. I'll say 48. Okay, yeah. Just to mention that. And he did, or they did, I'm sorry, Dracula. They encountered Dracula in one, Frankenstein monster. They did the Wolfman, and a few others, the Mummy, the Invisible Man, and so on and so forth. And they were all fun. They were fun. Yes. It was so much fun to watch those films. So I decided to take a look back and see the origins of that. How far back does that go?
Uh-huh.
And there's mention of it in pre-recorded history. Well, I can't say pre-recorded because it's recorded. I guess it's not pre-recorded in cassette tape, for your listening pleasure, but it's since the Epic of Gilgamesh. Yep. There were werewolves mentioned, where Gilgamesh, one love interest, he declined her advances because her previous, I guess, love interest, she had turned into a werewolf or a werewolf man or something to that effect. So there's this ancient context, the notion of humans being transformed into this werewolf creature. And I'll mention a couple of other bits just, off the top of the thing I'm reading here briefly. In Greek mythology, they have it, right? And pushing out of Greek mythology, they also have it in Europe in the Middle Ages, everywhere from Germany, France, England. It just spreads throughout. And there were incidences where people would be accused of it, just like the witch trials and all that, were accused of it. And in some instances, people were accused, and it had nothing to do with any fear of that human being turned into or turning into this monster, but it was a, I guess you could say, conspiracy by locals that wanted a certain person out of the spotlight. And so they'd call them, oh, there's a heretic, there's a witch, or there's a werewolf, and so on. And they'd burn them up, chop them in pieces, toss them in the pond, and so there's a history of that. And we've inherited that werewolf concept, and it's become what it's become. And just finally, in recent years, there's been a whole host of movies, not even to mention back in the early 20th century and throughout the 20th century, but in the 21st century, there's been a host of really cool sort of like reinventing of that old story,
right,
where you'll have characters with weapons like modern day, like guns and pistolas, and they're fighting in the tunnels of New York, and the vampires against it. And it's just become, it's a whole industry, as far as entertainment. But there are roots going back in time, right, in the dark. Even like I mentioned, the Greeks, like Plato mentioned, that they are mentioned throughout, symbolic or not. This is not to say whether something is, there's a truth to it or not, but it's an interesting sort of story as it unfolded throughout history.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, yes, I did. The werewolf was one of the ones I was looking at too.
Oh well, goodness.
And if you look at the display name that I'm using now, I figured the right people will get that. In the 1941 movie, The Wolfman, Lon Chaney was the Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr., and his character name in that movie was Lawrence Talbot. So I chose my display name L. Talbot. Talbot. That's funny. Just to associate that. But
well, tell me what you think about all that, because if you investigated, I'm sure.
I looked into that too, and I was amazed at how far back it went. I didn't know it went back into, when you say before recorded history, those stories were passed down verbally until such time as they did start writing things down. And it is mentioned in some of the oldest texts. I had no idea it went back that far.
Yeah. It's shocking.
Yeah, it was very, very shocking. So it was a case of, I didn't think about Teen Wolf, but I thought American Werewolf in London, then Young Frankenstein, and then, because it's Halloween season, and Young Frankenstein references come out during Halloween, and that's just it. I mean, you will not go the next month without hearing Blucher at least once, and the right people will go, so, but yeah, I got to looking into that, and that was the kind of the old movie like that, the 1941, The Wolfman, and Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, Abbott and Costello meet the Wolfman, Abbott and Costello meet the Invisible Man. And in fact, in the movie Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, it was the werewolf and Frankenstein's monster and the Invisible Man in that movie. So I remember watching that as well. And I think that wasn't my first exposure to the Wolfman, because I did see the 41 movie, The Wolfman, which was very good. But that was, to me, one of the classic horror monsters, man. And I still dig that stuff. I really do. It's old, it's campy, it's cheesy, and I know it, but I still dig it because it's what I grew up on.
There's a movie which probably we're most of us familiar with, called Nosferatu.
Mm-hmm.
And it is incredibly creepy in that it's very old. I forget exactly what when it was recorded, but probably in the 30s or 20s.
It's a silent movie, so it was in the teens or 20s.
It's because it's silent, And because it's recorded back then, there's a lot of inconsistency in quality, and that's mostly due to the fact that um, the people of that film were sued and were forced to destroy all the copies of that film. But the film that has been handed down to us through the different decades up till now are copies in private holding across the world, and they've done, a rehash of it using those private copies. But we don't have the original source material because they were forced to, since it was a copy of the Dracula novels. The one of the Dracula novel heirs, Brian. Who's the
Bram Stoker heirs? Yeah.
I think they went ahead and sued these people, and they had to do what they did. But it's out on the internet everywhere, but it's creepy as heck.
Yeah.
They did it good, man. I think
it was one of the first German movies. It was made in 1922 in Germany and was released here in 1929. But that was a print of the original German theatrical release. And Bram Stoker's estate, his heirs, won a lawsuit, and the films were ordered to be destroyed, and they were. But a few copies that were out of the country and therefore out of the jurisdiction of that court order, they survived. And that's what you're seeing now is reprints of those.
Thank goodness, because it's really the creep factor of how they did the monster himself and the scenes. There's a quality to it that leaves, if you sit and watch it quietly, I mean, you'll get the horror feel. But I don't know that any of the other Draculas have done it as much justice as far as the vibe as that film did, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was very intense, very creepy. And for a silent film, you wouldn't think it would hold your attention as well as it does. But if you put it on and put that up on full screen and just watch the film unfold, you will find yourself enveloped in it. You will get drawn in. It does hold up. I mean, yes, it's old. It's a silent movie made in 1922, but it holds up.
Yeah, they did it justice. The characters that they picked, actors, very well done, dude.
Yeah, they did do it justice.
So. A lot of creepy stuff. And of course, it is Halloween 2020. And I want to ask you, have you ever experienced something creepy, unexplained in your life? That to this day, not something you've resolved, like, dare I say, the Atom Smasher, which, by the way, is one of our episodes. It's episode number
11, I think.
Number 11, you say?
I think so, yes.
You might want to go check out our Trampled Underfoot Podcast.com website, and you could press the Wayback Machine button and check out all those episodes, but particularly check out that Atom Smasher episode, which is very entertaining. And if you are scratching your head as to what exactly is an Atom Smasher, well, Mark will tell you all about it in that episode. We do also have a Facebook page, and that's Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook. And you could go over there and check out the posts. We usually leave little tidbits and videos and links and pictures. And then you can leave information there, such as, we'd like to hear you guys talk about this, or that. And we'll appreciate that. We're also sponsored by Harneal Media. That's Steve Nealon at harnealmedia.com. And if you have need to create a website or want to sell something from shirts to handbags and art, or have a product yourself, or you just want to put your brand out there for your artistic needs, well, Steve, it's a personalized service, and that's over at harnealmedia.com. He'll take care of that for you. Just reach out to him, leave him a message, and he'll get you set up right away. Did you see how I injected that into our conversation?
Very well done, and I might even capture that because it's my edit this week. I might even capture that to save it. So if we screw one up horribly, I've got one that I can just, hey, let me throw that in there. You know,
You're lucky I didn't throw in like horror Halloween sort of references into that, because that's what I was thinking, but I said no, let me stick to it because I'm going to do that badly. So I just
what I could do for the Halloween for the audio edit is, for our audio podcast, is I can like a howling wolf in the background, and cricket and shit. So, and I said that, so I have to edit that out. So what I'll do now is I'll go back and do that, and then from here on in the recording. So to check it out, you'll have to go listen to the audio podcast. What I'm going to do from now on is just pick words and bleep them. So you'll have to try to figure out what we're talking about and wade through the bleeps. It's called unnecessary censorship, and I'm a firm believer. So I'll just pick a random word and bleep it every once in a while.
You know what I appreciate most about that little moment? Well,
that it was me and not you this time.
yeah. I enjoyed that so much. Because because it also indicates that you were in the moment.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And totally and that's the good thing about what we do, because we truly, and that's why we set it up in this fashion, so that we could just sort of exchange of ideas and forget that we're, doing what we're doing publicly and whatnot.
You forget it's easy to do, I mean, I'm over here reading the chat about half of the time, and I know we don't often get over and acknowledge the folks in the chat, but I'm not kidding you. Javi's been on a roll over there, man. Him and Jim Dockrell basically gave half of the script to Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein, bantering back and forth, and it's been moving, and it's been fun. I'm watching the chat over there. Keep it up, Javi. You're doing a good job. So
getting to the question of, have you experienced something creepy, unexplained, that never got resolved?
I'm going to be a wet blanket and say, no, I really haven't. I mean, just about anything that stands out in my mind like that has happened. I mean, other than just a startle, like we were talking about early, you're walking from the house out to the car or something like that, and a cat jumps out from behind the car and scares the bejeebers out of you. I mean, it's mainly stuff like that. I haven't really had any kind of experiences of something that was unexplained that freaked me out or creeped me out.
Have you ever been walking down the sidewalk and skipped over cracks on the pavement because of the old saying, step on a crack, break your mother's back? Have you ever?
When I was a kid, yeah. I mean, I think we've all done stuff like that. Superstitious kind of things, sure.
Have you? Go ahead.
I mean, but that's all.
I know it's not the same as.
Yeah, it's all silly little things like that. But as far as superstitions are concerned, I don't know. I think in my younger days I did. I paid attention to stuff like that, but not really. I mean,
Did you ever feel a breeze on one side of your neck, or a tickle in the wrong spot as you're watching a movie or something, or you feel like a little rub across the arm, and why is that rubbing now in this point of the movie?
It depends on what it is. I mean, in that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, when they're first going into that first cave, when they go to get that gold idol where the big ball is that rolls down and chases them and stuff, when they first step in there and the spider on Indy's back, and he has, he knocks it off, and he has the other guy turn around, and that guy's back is just covered with spiders. I swear I could feel them crawling on me. Stuff like that, But anymore, not really. I mean, No, it's generally speaking, if there's a draft, I get up and I close the window or something like that. I haven't really experienced anything creepy or goony like that. It just
Well, well, again, for listeners out there, you know, if you are interested in what did creep out Mark here, you could go back to that episode over on trampledunderfootpodcast.com, pressing the Wayback Machine button, checking out that episode 11, we think, which is
I confirm that it is episode 11. Yes.
so the Atom Smasher, and that's a very entertaining Halloween, because it was on Halloween that we did that show.
It was our first Halloween show. Yes, 2 years ago.
It was actually so entertaining because I like the way we just laid it out naturally, but it worked its way it worked in such a way that it had that good fuzzy back in the day feeling with us recounting those stories, and it just all flowed the way I personally enjoy something to flow. I enjoyed that episode, so you might want to check that one out. So fair enough with you saying, nothing of that sort other than what we just mentioned, but that it was resolved in your later in life. But how about let me see how willing you are to cross certain lines, or if you would, and we don't want to say like we want to be as realistic about it. I'll explain. Would you be opposed to, say, and we're talking creepy things that would people do or not do, would you be okay with staying in an old abandoned mansion, like a creepy sort of like Addams Family mansion? Would you, knowing yourself, would you do that?
I'd check it out. I'd go explore it, and if there weren't any critters living in it, why not?
No problem.
No problem. Why not?
Have you ever been in a house that had awful at night creaking, and you could hear the wood creaking, and just have you ever?
Many of them. I sold real estate, man. I've been in many old houses that had creaks and groans and pops and moans and stuff like that. And you hear skittering noises up in the boards above you, up in the ceiling above you, which is mice or rats or what have you. Been in many an old house that had weird, 100-year-old, 120-year-old, 150-year-old houses that had weird noises. You had boilers or hot water heaters that gurgled and made noises. You knew somebody was in that other room, and you flip the light on, and it's just that's the hot water heater making noise. It happens with old places.
It's because there's so much, wood moves. We know that wood moves.
Yeah.
And that pipes can have air pockets, temperature can swell, or reduce the the conduit, let's say. Leaks, wood clanking up, when just rats, mice,
But now that brings back an interesting question, and I don't remember your answer. We put up a video when we first started this video channel here on YouTube. Look for Trampled Underfoot Podcast on YouTube. And I asked you, let's say you're in one of those old houses, abandoned, derelict, no utilities, flip every switch in the house, lights don't come on, water doesn't come on, nothing. You're exploring that house. It's dark, it's dingy. All of a sudden, the telephone on the wall rings. Do you answer it?
No. There's no need to that if there's no electricity. Although the line can be, there could be no electricity in the house, and the line could still work.
Right, understood. What I'm getting at is the place is abandoned. There hasn't been utilities turned on in that place forever, and all of a sudden the phone rings. Would you answer it?
And what if you pick it up and what's on the other line is said, "Hello, Mark. We see you."
I would answer it because I know my luck. It would be somebody saying, "We've been trying to contact you about your vehicle's extended warranty." That's my luck. That's what it would be. So sure.
Would you spend a night alone inside the pyramid at Giza in the darkness?
Sure. Actually,
Not to be. That sounds cool.
Yeah.
That sounds creepy.
Now you'd have to take certain precautions because there's snakes, scorpions, and stuff like that, spiders, things that real live creepy crawlies that So you'd have to take certain precautions. But sure, why not? I think that would be cool.
I mean, I'm just one step away from saying, "Hey, Mark, would you mind taking a trip on the River Styx down to Hades?" And you'd be like, "Yeah, why not?"
Well, that's mythological, but what the hell? I don't do white water though, so if you're talking about whitewater rafting, forget it.
No, we're just talking fire and brimstone.
If it's a lazy river, no waterfalls, I'm good.
Jeez Louise, I'm just trying to find a point at which you'd say, "No, dude, that's too much. We can't do that."
There's got to be a perceived threat. There has to be a threat. And I've been in several old houses. Don't get me wrong. I look around and I explore, and I am looking over my shoulder.
There's no way that in Egypt, and then so like the Egyptian guy says, they give you a torch, and imagine the wind, and like it's a starry night. You could hear the wind, and say, "All right, Mark, you're on your own. There's no way to contact you. We will be back in the morning," and the sun is going down. And you just you're alone with a torch, and you walk through into the chamber and down, and you have to go to and you have the thing. And here's the thing: once you reach it, you could look around for like 10 minutes in that chamber that echoes. And once you're done with that, you have to snuff out the torch. And from that point on till morning.
See, I love how you pile all these conditions on it too. Why don't you just put me in short pants with a really itchy rash?
Well, no, because
conditions on it. I get it. You're trying to find the line. Then no, I probably wouldn't do it because, like I said, there are certain precautions you have to take because there are threats. There are snakes. There are spiders. There are scorpions. There are things that can bite you or sting you and kill you. So you do have to take some precautions. I don't believe in slapping fate in the face, but just because it's an Egyptian pyramid, sure, I'll go sleep in it. I don't care.
I'm glad you made that distinction because, without explaining it that way, because you could easily say, "Sure, I'll do the pyramid," but in your mind, maybe you're in the chamber, but like there's internet and freaking they put a nice water mattress and you've got like a popcorn machine and
I'm not asking for any of that stuff either.
You know what I'm saying? Like Christmas lights and stuff, and it's like a teen bedroom, posters of like chicks with motorcycles and.
Give me a tent that I can, with a bottom in it, that I can set up and zip up to keep the creepy crawlies out, and my sleeping bag, and a flashlight, maybe a little lantern, and then a way to make coffee in the morning. And sure, I'm set. I have slept in worse in the Army. I have slept in trucks, on trucks, under trucks. I have slept in trailers, on trailers, under trailers. I have slept in foxholes. If you can find a place that's reasonably horizontal and you have a few minutes, go to sleep. That's all there is to it.
There's place though, like I don't think that I would, if it were my preference, sleep in a freaking like abandoned haunted house type looking thing. I don't think I'd do it. I don't think I'd do the pyramid thing. See, I don't want to tempt fate.
Well, a cave scares me more than an abandoned house or a pyramid or something like that because you don't know what's in there. You don't know what's in the cave. Is there bears hibernating in there? Is that a cougar or mountain lion's den? You don't know what's in that cave. So I take a wide berth around caves. Maybe not wide enough sometimes, but I don't believe in slapping fate in the face because there could be a genuine threat in there. But as far as spirits of ancient Egypt and Imhotep coming back to life and choking me to death because I'm sleeping in a pyramid, I don't believe it.
I get you. So it would have to be you would probably say no if I were to tell you Mark, African savanna, little tent is pitched there for you. You got to stay the whole night. And you've got a little radio, so you can make as much noise as you want if you want to. I think that you would say no to that. And there's no weapons that you're holding.
Am I the only one out there?
Of course. Well,
and I probably wouldn't go for that, just simply because I don't know the territory.
Well, I want to know what's the first danger that you thought of, because I know what I'm thinking as far as the first danger. Remember, African savanna and so on.
On the savanna, God, there's so many nocturnal predators out there. It's hard telling.
Which is the first one that would?
It's a toss up. There were two that popped into my brain. One was lions, and the other was hippopotamus.
Well, you see, I was thinking lions, but either or, and there's all sorts of other. There's hyenas, there's leopards, there's all sorts of creatures.
Yeah, they're all over the place. But like hyenas, they hunt during the day, but more people are killed every year by hippopotamuses than by lions and hyenas combined.
Well, if you're in a little tent in the middle of like an open field, and by the way, that I mentioned, apart from that little radio that you can use or not, you get a little lantern, a little lantern. But by the rules of this adventure, there's a little machine that sends out a potpourri smell of fresh meat. So we're trying to encompass the whole, we're trying to get it so that you say just emphatically no.
Yeah, I already said no, I wouldn't do that if I was the only one out there, because I need somebody to have my back. So, but hippopotamuses are aggressive, territorial creatures, and they're not the nice little fat, chubby, smiling, temperament of a bunny rabbit type of a thing. They are very aggressive, they are vicious, and they defend their territory. And anything is a threat, they don't care. I mean, you can find videos of hippopotamuses attacking boats that happen to stray into their turf and didn't know there was a hippo in the underwater.
And the sheer size of them and power behind them, I mean, those creatures.
And they move quick. They're not these big lumbering things. They are fast.
Now, I wonder at which point, according to what we understand as far as the development of throughout history, prehistory, mankind, I think to myself, and this is an unknown, I think, I mean, at least, for now, I guess, at what point do humans back in that prehistoric era living in Africa, along with these and by the way, maybe even not maybe even the ancestors of these current lions and hippos, which were probably even deadlier, and crazier, whacked out frickin'. How did these humans? I mean, the survival ratio in that environment you have to find a way to protect yourself,
And if you notice, they live in the areas those creatures ain't. They don't live down by the river where the hippos are. They know there are certain places on the river they can go where they're safe for that, but they don't live right by the river. They live a distance away. They don't live out near where the lions are, and there's usually people up all night with fires going to scare off the larger predators.
Right.
And but even on safaris and on tours and things like that civilians can go on, you or I could book a safari and go to Africa. There are people up night with firearms. It's their job to keep predators away from the whole encampment. I've heard, I've never been, but I have heard that the most terrifying thing that a person can experience is trying to go to sleep in a tent on the African savanna. But the most breathtaking thing is waking up from that sleep on the African.
I bet.
because at night all the predators and all the creatures come out and you hear every noise, every twig snap while you're laying there trying to go to sleep, and the weird ugly insects come out, and of course they're attracted to your lantern or your flashlight, and they just right there. So from what I understand, it's a very frightening experience trying to fall asleep, but waking up the next morning when birds are chirping and the sun's coming up and the crickets are starting to die down and everything. It's supposedly absolutely breathtaking. I don't know. I've never been, but that's just anecdotally what I've heard from other folks.
It's an insane thing but that people, and I guess, obviously people marched on and out of that. And I don't know if that was a factor, but it's not like they have borders. Like, this area is not the lion area, so lions will absolutely not. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no defined.
True. But it's no different from the Native Americans here with dealing with grizzly bears and bobcats and mountain lions and all the other predators. They found safety in numbers and just the presence of humans, of a large group. It's just like wolves are not afraid of a single bison, but they are scared to death of a herd of bison. So they wouldn't go into a herd, and they're pack animals. They wouldn't dive headlong into a herd of bison because they'd get stomped to death, and they knew that.
Yeah.
They would try to separate a weak one from the rest of the herd. So humans were no different. They knew that the humans would, just by sheer numbers alone, would kill them off. So they didn't go attack a large village. They would try to separate one of the weak or the infirm from the village. And then that's the one they went after. They could take them, 5 on 1 that way, but they couldn't take 50 on 5. So, and that's more or less how, one of the reasons that societies and clans and groups stuck together.
Survival.
And to be fair, that's also why we moved into cities, because we don't have to deal with that,
Yeah, well, and there's a price to pay for that. But it makes total sense. And I don't understand why, even back, I mean, as far as we know, and I guess they did, there's examples of very ancient, but not like I'm in the heart of Africa that I'm aware of, which would be a curious thing to explore. The idea of building walled cities, fortifications, elevated, like they did in medieval times at the pinnacle of that. The idea of having a castle or fort or whatever at a high point with a frickin' deep gorge or moat up on high and visible, areas that you can look out in each direction. The setup of defending, a society, a little clan or whatever. It's brilliant. It makes total sense. Obviously it does. But
they worked with what they had, and there were some tribes who did kind of wall in their areas when they could find the materials to make walls. And that was a defense against some predators.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, if you look at the environment that they were working in, they didn't have a lot to work with. The reason they made stick structures that were very loosely built was so air could circulate through. All you had to do, you didn't have to be hermetically sealed in a hut to be safe from the lions. You just had to make the cracks between the sticks smaller than the lion.
Right.
It couldn't get to you. And, but you still had to have air to breathe.
You know what's good? The idea of, like they did in World War I and like you'd have everybody, they're sitting out in whatever theater, and they had those trenches, but then they had those sticks pointing angled forward and out. I love that idea because, and if you do a lot of it, because if there's predators, they have to get through that crap.
The only problem is flash floods. You can't get out. You're stuck. Flash floods too. and it doesn't even have to be raining where you are. Anybody who's ever lived in Texas and Arizona or New Mexico knows this, and Nevada, Southern California, some parts. It doesn't even have to be raining where you are. It could be raining 100 miles away, but that sudden influx of water comes rushing downstream. You're gone, and you are powerless to stop it. People are killed every year by flash floods. So and not all of them survived. We got to remember that we are all the descendants of the survivors. So they made the buildings and the structures they made because not all of them did survive. I mean, there were people that did build their house down by the river, and suddenly they have a hippo in the living room. They learned you don't do that. You don't build your house on the side of this hill because stuff rolls down it. Water or just rock slides or what have you.
Yeah.
So you build in certain areas. You stay away from that plant. You stay away from this tree. You can build by this tree and you're fine. Unless there's bees, then stay away from that tree. So it was trial and error for eons until they developed a system that worked for them.
Yep.
So
listen, I'm going to look for a particular video, homemade video of a guy that traveled to the Dracula castle that was used in the film Nosferatu. And this gentleman, he digs traveling and all that, and he visits that castle. And in the video, as far as for our Halloween theme here, which is Halloween 2020, and I think it's a very nice, for those of you interested, you'll really dig it, because in that video, he'll angle his modern camera at an archway and film it nowadays. And likewise, he'll pull in the footage of the archway in the film and explain the, where everything is at and a little bit of explanation. And he walks all the way to the top of the castle and all the way back down. And it's huge. It's so awesome, dude. It's so awesome.
Cool. I'd love to see that. Where are you going to put that?
Oh, that's going to be on our Trampled Underfoot podcast page on Facebook. And so you can go over there and check it out on our page on Facebook. And we will post, throughout our career here at Trampled Underfoot, various, items that we talk about.
Okay. I'll look forward to it. I'd like to check that out. There has been, occasionally we get off on these tangents and we talk about rabbit holes that we fall down. Here lately, I've been looking, I've fallen into the then and now rabbit hole where folks they'll take a photo of a scene, a group of soldiers during World War I standing in a town in France. And then, much like what you were just talking about, they'll set up their modern cameras and they'll take that exact same angle, that exact same shot, what it looks like now. And some of them will even superimpose the old photo back into it so you can get a reference as to where these soldiers were standing or marching or whatever.
I love that. It's really cool.
Stuff is really cool. And there are some things about movie sets, former locations of old filming sites and what have you. They'll show it now, and then they'll show the old and kind of superimpose them together.
I really enjoy that whole angle because it gives you sort of an outlook, time periods, and the passage of time. It's a great little thing that they do. I want to use that. Or I've thought of using that technique here in Sweetwater, juxtaposed with today and back then. I've thought of that, but I haven't gotten around to it. I like that idea.
I think it'd be cool. I think it'd be real cool.
I just posted it up on our Trampled Underfoot podcast page, and that'll be there for you. But I think we wish you guys a great Halloween. It's been a horrid 2020. Um, but
Quiet, it'll hear you. Don't provoke it. Don't poke the bear.
oh my goodness, it's like I don't know, man. It's insane. Uh, so I enjoyed this episode. Any final words?
Just don't let the ghosties and goblins get you. Stay safe. Wear your reflective vest so the nutburgers don't hit you. And just have a safe, friendly, and fun Halloween, y'all. And we'll see y'all next week.
See you later.
Peace.